You know what they say about small towns. Everyone knows your business, especially when your business involves your wife screwing around with the richest bastard in 3 counties. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up and tell you how Ed Harlow, former construction foreman turned gimpy amateur painter, became the most talked about son of a bitch in Millbrook, Maine. It started 6 months ago, right after I'd gotten used to holding a paintbrush instead of a hammer. The accident that crushed my right arm also crushed my 20-year construction career, but hey, at least I got a settlement and a new hobby out of it. My wife, Melissa, thought it was therapeutic for me to paint. She runs the Millbrook Gallery downtown, so she knows about these things, or so I thought. Ed, you're getting paint on the kitchen table again, Melissa called from the living room where she was flipping through some fancy art magazine. She didn't look up. She rarely looked up anymore. Sorry, honey. Just working on that seascape you liked. I dabbed at the blue smudge with a paper towel. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was painting water scenes when my marriage was drowning. Melissa finally glanced over, her blonde hair catching the afternoon light streaming through our cottage windows. At 39, she still turned heads around town, and she knew it. That's nice, dear. Listen, I'll be late tonight. Julian Crane is flying in from Boston to discuss a potential exhibition. Julian fucking Crane. If you've never met a man who considers himself God's gift to the art world, let me paint you a picture. 45 years old, silver-haired, drives a custom Porsche that costs more than most people's houses, and owns a mansion overlooking Penobscot Bay. He collects art the way other men collect baseball cards, except his hobby involves throwing around enough money to make gallery directors weak in the knees. Another late night with Julian, I said, trying to keep the edge out of my voice. That's the 3rd this month. It's business, Ed. Important business. The gallery needs this exhibition if we're going to stay afloat. She went back to her magazine, dismissing me like I was the hired help. I wanted to point out that my settlement money had kept the gallery afloat for the past year, but I'd learned to pick my battles. Instead, I focused on my painting, adding darker blues to the water. Storm clouds were gathering on my canvas, and apparently in my life too. That evening, I sat in my makeshift studio, the spare bedroom that smelled like turpentine and disappointment, when Melissa breezed through in a black dress that I hadn't seen before. It hugged her curves in ways that made my chest tight with something that wasn't quite desire anymore. "How do I look?" she asked, spinning once. "Like $1,000,000. Julian will be impressed." She missed the sarcasm entirely. "Thanks. Don't wait up." After her car pulled out of our gravel driveway, I sat there staring at my half-finished painting. The waves looked angry now, crashing against rocks that couldn't move, couldn't fight back. I knew the feeling. My phone buzzed. Text from my buddy Mick, who tends bar at O'Malley's downtown. "Beer and bullshit?" "Sarah's working the late shift." 20 minutes later, I was nursing a bud and watching Mick polish glasses with the efficiency of a man who'd been doing it for 15 years. O'Malley's hadn't changed much since high school. Same sticky floors, same neon beer signs, same locals who treated it like their personal therapy session. "You look like someone stole your lunch money," Mick said, sliding another beer across the scarred wooden bar. "Let me guess. Melissa's working late again?" "With Julian Crane." Again. Mick's expression shifted from sympathetic to knowing. At 44, he'd seen enough marriages implode to recognize the warning signs. "Ed, buddy, you sure you want to go down this road?" "What road?" "The road where you start adding up all the late nights and new dresses and mysterious phone calls. Because once you start counting, you can't stop." I took a long pull of beer and stared at the mirror behind the bar. The man looking back at me had gray creeping into his brown hair and lines around his green eyes that hadn't been there before the accident. My right arm hung a little crooked now, a permanent reminder that I wasn't the man I used to be. "Maybe I'm just being paranoid," I said. "Maybe. Or maybe your gut is trying to tell you something your brain doesn't want to hear." That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, until I heard Melissa's car in the driveway at 1:47 a.m. She slipped into bed smelling like expensive wine and something else, a cologne I didn't recognize. When I reached for her, she mumbled something about being tired and rolled away. The next morning, she was gone before I woke up. A note on the kitchen table. Early meeting at the gallery. See you tonight. M. I made coffee and sat at the table where I'd been painting the night before. The seascape looked different in the morning light, less angry, more sad, like it was mourning something that was already lost. That's when I decided to stop being the kind of man who painted his problems instead of facing them. I pulled out my laptop and did something I never thought I'd do. I ordered a GPS tracker on Amazon, 2-day delivery. As I clicked purchase, I muttered to myself, Ed Harlow, private investigator. Has a nice ring to it. The tracker arrived on Thursday, a tiny black device no bigger than a matchbox, with a magnetic case and a smartphone app that would show me exactly where Melissa's car went. I'm not proud of what I did next, but I'm not ashamed either. Sometimes a man has to know where he stands, even if it's on quicksand. Friday evening, while Melissa showered before another business meeting, I slipped outside and attached the tracker to the underside of her Honda Civic. My hands shook as I worked, not from nerves, but from the certainty that I was about to learn something I couldn't unlearn. I'm meeting Julian and some potential investors at the Harbor Club, she called through the bathroom door. Don't wait up. The Harbor Club was the fanciest restaurant in town, the kind of place where they put the prices in tiny font so you don't have a heart attack before the appetizers arrive. I waited 30 minutes after she left, then opened the tracking app on my phone. Her car was parked outside Julian Crane's mansion. I stared at the little blue dot on my screen for a long time, watching it sit motionless at 47 Cliff Road. The Harbor Club was on the other side of town. Either Melissa had gotten lost on the way to dinner, or she'd lied to me so smoothly that I almost admired her technique. Almost. I drove to Cliff Road and parked behind a stand of pine trees about 100 yards from Julian's gate. His house looked like something out of Architectural Digest, all glass and steel and expensive taste perched on the rocky coastline. Melissa's car sat in the circular driveway next to Julian's Porsche. Through the massive windows, I could see them in what looked like a living room. They weren't discussing art investments. They weren't discussing anything. Julian had his hands in Melissa's hair, and she was kissing him like he was oxygen and she was drowning. I sat in my truck for 2 hours, watching my marriage die through someone else's windows. When they moved upstairs and the lights went out, I drove home and sat in my studio until dawn, staring at my angry seascape and planning my next move. Because if Melissa thought she could play me for a fool while spending my settlement money on new dresses to impress her sugar daddy, she was about to learn that Ed Harlow might be broken, but he wasn't beaten. Not by a long shot. Saturday morning came with the kind of Maine fog that makes everything look like a ghost story waiting to happen. I was sitting at the kitchen table with my coffee and my rage when Melissa wandered downstairs in a silk robe I'd never seen before. Morning, she said, not quite meeting my eyes. You're up early. Couldn't sleep. How was dinner with the investors? She busied herself with the coffee maker, her back to me. Oh, you know how these things go. Lots of talk, not much action. We ended up at Julian's place afterward to look at his collection. The lie rolled off her tongue so easily that I almost believed it myself. Almost. His collection must be pretty impressive to keep you out until 3 a.m. Now she turned, and I saw something flicker across her face. Surprise, maybe, or calculation. Has it really been that long? Time flies when you're talking about art. I bet it does. She poured her coffee and sat across from me, the same table where I'd been painting seascapes and planning surveillance operations. In the morning light, she looked tired. Guilty tired, not business meeting tired. Ed, is everything okay? You seem different lately. Different how? I don't know. Distant. Suspicious, maybe. She reached across the table and touched my good hand. I know the accident changed things for us, but I'm still here. I'm still your wife. The sad thing was, part of me wanted to believe her. Part of me wanted to pretend I hadn't seen what I'd seen, that the GPS tracker was just paranoid fantasy, that my marriage wasn't a lie wrapped in silk robes and expensive cologne. But the other part of me, the part that had spent 20 years in construction learning that if something looks broken, it probably is, knew better. I'm fine, Mel. Just adjusting to the new normal. She squeezed my hand and smiled, the same smile that had made me fall in love with her 15 years ago. Good! Because I have some exciting news. Julian wants to give me a solo exhibition. My photography, Ed. Can you believe it? I could believe it, all right. I could believe that Julian Crane was willing to do a lot of things for my wife, and most of them had nothing to do with her artistic talent. That's great, honey. When? Next month. It'll be the biggest show the gallery has ever hosted. Julian's flying in collectors from New York, Boston, even Los Angeles. It could change everything for us. Change everything. She had that part right. After Melissa left for the gallery, I called Mick. You working today? Not until tonight. Why? Feel like taking a ride with a suspicious husband? Jesus, Ed. You sure about this? I'm sure about what I saw. I'm not sure what I'm going to do about it. Mick picked me up in his beat-up Chevy, and we drove to Julian's mansion. In daylight, it looked even more obscene, all that money and space for one man who collected other people's dreams. I told Mick what I'd witnessed the night before, watching his face go from skeptical to angry. That son of a bitch, he muttered, and Melissa, Christ, Ed, I'm sorry. Don't be sorry yet. Be angry. I need angry right now. We parked across the street and watched Julian's house like we were casing it for a heist, which in a way, we were. I was planning to steal back my dignity, and that required intelligence gathering. There, Mick pointed. Silver Porsche in the driveway. Custom plates. ART-GOD. What a pretentious asshole. Art God. I'll remember that. So what's the plan? We gonna slash his tires? Egg his house? I'm too old for this shit, but I'm also too pissed off to care. Nothing illegal, nothing that gets us arrested, but everything that makes his life as miserable as he's made mine. We spent the afternoon developing what Mick called Operation Payback, and I called the Final Canvas. Because that's what this was, my masterpiece, painted in humiliation and revenge instead of oils and watercolors. That evening, Melissa came home from the gallery with Chinese takeout and a bottle of wine. Celebrating? I asked. The exhibition. Julian finalized everything today. Ed, this could be huge for us. For the gallery, for my career, for our future. Our future. I wondered if Julian Crane figured into those long-term plans, or if I was just the disabled husband who paid the bills while she played house with her sugar daddy. I'm happy for you, Mel. Really. We ate dinner and made small talk about her photography, about my painting, about everything except the elephant in the room that was wearing expensive cologne and driving a custom Porsche. After she went to bed, I sat in my studio and made a list. Julian's weaknesses, pride, money, reputation, his precious car, Melissa's weaknesses, the gallery, her reputation in town, her mother's approval, my advantages. I was invisible. A broken-down construction worker who nobody saw coming. I knew this town, knew its people, knew how gossip traveled faster than wildfire in August. Most importantly, I knew something they didn't know I knew. The next morning, while Melissa was at her yoga class, I drove to the hardware store and bought supplies. Not for painting, for war. Zip ties, duct tape, a can of expanding foam, and a bottle of fish sauce from the Asian market next door. Planning a project? Asked Tom behind the counter. I'd worked construction with his brother for 5 years. You could say that. Home improvement. Good for you, Ed. About time you got back to building things. If only he knew what I was planning to build, or more accurately, what I was planning to tear down. That afternoon, I followed the GPS tracker to a new location, the Ocean View Motel on Route 1. Melissa's car was parked outside room 12, next to Julian's Porsche. The Ocean View was the kind of place that rented rooms by the hour and didn't ask questions about wedding rings. I sat in my truck across the parking lot, watching the closed door of room 12 and feeling something cold settle in my chest. The Harbor Club had been bad enough. At least, that could have been business. But the Ocean View Motel wasn't about art exhibitions or investor meetings. It was about my wife fucking another man in a $20 room that smelled like disinfectant and broken dreams. My phone buzzed. Text from Melissa. Working late at gallery. Don't wait up. I typed back, love you too. Then I drove home and called Mick. It's time, I said when he answered. Time for what? Time to show Julian Crane and my cheating wife what happens when you underestimate a broken-down construction worker with nothing left to lose. Ed, buddy, you're scaring me a little. Good. I'm scaring myself. But I'm also done being the victim in my own life. What do you need? A partner in crime, someone who's not afraid to get his hands dirty for a friend. Mick was quiet for a long moment. Then, what time do we start? Tonight. After they think I'm asleep. What's the target? I looked out my window toward the harbor, where Julian's mansion glowed like a beacon of everything I'd lost and everything I was about to take back. We're going to give Mr. Art God a masterpiece he'll never forget. Monday night, 11:47 p.m. Melissa was working late again, which meant she was at the Ocean View Motel teaching Julian Crane about her artistic talents. I sat in my truck outside his mansion, wearing dark clothes and a baseball cap, feeling like the world's oldest, most bitter teenager about to toilet paper the rich kid's house. Except what I had planned was going to be a lot more creative than toilet paper. Mick crouched beside me in the passenger seat, holding a backpack full of supplies. You sure about this, Ed? Once we cross that line, there's no going back. I crossed the line 6 months ago when I married a woman who thinks for better or worse means until someone richer comes along. Fair point. So what's first? The Porsche. A man's car is his pride and joy, especially when it costs more than most people make in 3 years. Julian's custom Porsche sat in the driveway like a silver sculpture, gleaming under the security lights. I'd done my homework. No alarm system on the car itself, just the house. Apparently, Julian figured nobody in Millbrook was stupid enough to mess with his toys. He was about to learn otherwise. We crept across his manicured lawn, staying low and moving fast. My gimpy arm made stealth challenging, but rage is a hell of a motivator. I pulled out the first surprise, a magnetic bumper sticker I'd had custom made at the print shop in town. In bright red letters, honk if you're sleeping with my wife. Jesus Christ, Ed, Mick whispered as I slapped it on the Porsche's rear bumper. That's brutal. That's just the appetizer. Next came the fish sauce. I'd learned about this trick from a construction buddy who'd had problems with his ex-wife's new boyfriend. You pour it into the car's air intake vents, and when they turn on the heat, or AC, the smell is like being trapped inside a tuna fish sandwich that's been sitting in the sun for a week. I was halfway through emptying the bottle when we heard it, the low growl of a very large, very unhappy dog. Ed, Mick hissed. We've got company. Julian's German Shepherd came around the corner of the house like a furry missile, all teeth and bad intentions. I'd forgotten about the dog, a major oversight that was about to get us both arrested or mauled. Run, I said. What about you? I said run. Mick took off toward the trees while I limped as fast as my busted body would carry me toward the gate. The dog was gaining ground, barking loud enough to wake the entire neighborhood. I could hear lights coming on in nearby houses, voices calling out to ask what was happening. I made it to my truck just as the dog reached the driveway. As I peeled out, I saw Julian's house lighting up like a Christmas tree, and I caught a glimpse of a figure in the upstairs window. But it wasn't Julian. It was Melissa. She was supposed to be at the motel. Instead, she was standing in Julian's bedroom window, wearing what looked like one of his shirts and nothing else, watching me flee like a common criminal. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table drinking coffee and waiting for the police to show up. They didn't. Apparently, Julian wasn't eager to explain to law enforcement why my wife had been at his house at midnight, or why someone might want to vandalize his car. Melissa came home around 10, looking tired and guilty and beautiful in the way that made my chest ache with everything I was losing. "Morning," she said, avoiding my eyes. "You're up early again." "Couldn't sleep." "Bad dreams." She poured coffee and sat across from me, the same routine we'd been playing for months, except now I knew she'd seen me at Julian's house. The question was, what was she going to do about it? "Ed, we need to talk." Here it comes, I thought. The confrontation, the tears, the confession. Part of me was almost relieved. About what? About us. About where we're going. About whether we're going anywhere at all. I set down my coffee cup and looked at her. Really looked at her, for the first time in months. She was still beautiful, still the woman I'd fallen in love with. But she was also a stranger now, someone who could lie to my face while planning her escape route. "Where do you think we're going, Mel?" "I think we're in trouble." "I think we have been for a while, and neither of us wants to admit it." "And what do you think we should do about that?" She was quiet for a long time, staring into her coffee like it might have answers. When she finally looked up, her eyes were wet. "I think maybe we should take a break. Some time apart to figure out what we want. A break." I tasted the word like it was poison. "How long a break?" "I don't know. A few weeks? A month? However long it takes." "And where would you go during this break?" "I could stay at my mother's, or maybe rent a place in town, or maybe move in with Julian Crane," I thought but didn't say. Instead, I nodded like her suggestion made perfect sense, like I was just a reasonable man considering his options. "Okay," I said. "A break might be good for both of us." The relief on her face was like a slap. She'd been expecting a fight, tears, pleading. Instead, I was giving her exactly what she wanted, permission to leave without having to admit why. "Really? You're okay with this?" "Mel, if you're not happy, then neither of us is happy. Maybe some space will help us figure things out." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Thank you for understanding. I know this isn't easy." "Easy, right." That afternoon, I helped her pack. She took her clothes, her camera equipment, and about half of everything else we'd accumulated in 15 years of marriage. She also took my heart and stomped on it, but that wasn't something you could fit in a suitcase. "I'll call you in a few days," she said, as she loaded the last box into her car. "Maybe we can have dinner, talk about things." "Sure. Take care of yourself." She kissed my cheek, a sisterly peck that felt like a goodbye, and drove away. I stood in our driveway watching her taillights disappear, then went inside and called Mick. "She's gone," I said when he answered. "Gone, gone, or just gone?" She asked for a break, packed her things and left. "Jesus, Ed." "I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry. Be ready." "Ready for what?" Phase 2. If Melissa wants to play house with Julian Crane, I'm going to make sure they get the full domestic experience, including the parts where everything goes to hell. "What do you have in mind?" I walked into my studio and looked at my paintings, seascapes and landscapes and portraits of a life that no longer existed. Then I picked up a brush and started mixing colors, dark blues and angry grays and the deep red of betrayal. "I'm going to paint them a picture they'll never forget," I said. "And when I'm done, everyone in Millbrook is going to know exactly what kind of people they really are." "Ed, Julian Crane thinks he can buy anything he wants, including my wife. But he's about to learn that some things aren't for sale. Like revenge, like justice, like the satisfaction of watching a rich bastard get everything he deserves. I hung up and got to work. If Melissa wanted artistic inspiration, I was about to give her more than she could handle. 3 days after Melissa moved out, I drove past Julian's mansion and saw her Honda parked in his driveway like it belonged there. No more sneaking around, no more motel rooms. She'd moved straight from our marriage bed to his, with a pit stop at her mother's house for appearances. The fish sauce had done its job. Julian's Porsche sat in the garage with all the windows down, airing out. But that was just the opening act. What I had planned next was going to be the main event. I'd spent those 3 days doing research, making phone calls, and preparing what Mick called the nuclear option. Because if Melissa and Julian wanted to humiliate me publicly by flaunting their affair all over town, I was going to return the favor. With interest. First stop, WMLB, the local radio station where my high school buddy Dave worked as a DJ. Dave owed me a favor from when I'd renovated his kitchen for cost, and I was ready to collect. Ed Harlow, Dave said when I walked into the station. Heard about you and Melissa. Tough break, man. Word travels fast. Small town, big mouths. What can I do for you? I pulled out a CD I'd burned the night before. Remember that favor you owe me? The kitchen job? Yeah, what about it? I need you to play something on the air, during prime time. Dave looked at the CD like it might explode. What kind of something? The kind that reveals the truth about certain people in this town who think they're above consequences. Ed, I can't just... Dave, how much did I save you on that kitchen? 5 grand? 10? He sighed and took the CD. What am I playing? A recording of my wife and her new boyfriend discussing their relationship. Very candidly. I'd made the recording 2 nights earlier, using a digital recorder I'd hidden in Melissa's camera bag before she moved out. The conversation had taken place in Julian's living room, and it was everything I'd hoped for and more. This is going to get me fired, Dave said. No, it's going to get you ratings. Trust me. That evening, I sat in O'Malley's with Mick and half the town, waiting for the 7 p.m. news update. Dave had promised to play the recording right after the weather report, when most of Millbrook would be tuned in. You sure about this? Mick asked for the 10th time. I'm sure about what they did to me. Everything else is just payback. At 7:15, Dave's voice came through the bar's speakers. And now, something a little different. We received an anonymous tip about some interesting conversations happening in our community. Judge for yourselves. The recording was crystal clear. Melissa's voice, laughing. God, Julian, I can't believe I wasted 15 years with Ed. He's so ordinary, so broken now. Julian's response, forget about him, darling. After your exhibition, you won't need to pretend anymore. We can be together openly. Melissa again, I feel guilty sometimes. He really loves me. Julian, love doesn't pay for gallery exhibitions or European vacations. I can give you everything he never could. The bar went dead silent. Every conversation stopped, every beer paused halfway to lips. Then the whispers started, growing into a buzz of outrage and gossip that would fuel Millbrook's rumor mill for months. My phone started ringing. I let it go to voicemail. Holy shit, Ed, Mick whispered. You just nuked them from orbit. Good. Let them explain that to her mother. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. Most were from numbers I didn't recognize, people who'd heard the radio broadcast and wanted to offer support, condolences, or just plain gossip. A few were from Melissa, starting angry and ending desperate. How could you do this to me? Ed, please call me. We need to talk. You're destroying everything I've worked for. Please, I'm begging you. I deleted them all and drove to the gallery. Melissa was standing outside, crying and talking on her phone. When she saw my truck, she hung up and ran over. Ed, please. You have to help me fix this. Fix what? The radio thing. People are calling me a gold digger, a cheater, a... She stopped, unable to say the words. A what, Mel? A liar? A user? Someone who throws away 15 years of marriage for a man with a bigger bank account? It's not like that. It's exactly like that. I heard it in your own words. She grabbed my arm, my bad arm, and squeezed. Please, Ed. I made a mistake. I was confused, hurt, angry about your accident and how everything changed between us, but I never meant for it to go this far. How far did you mean for it to go? Just the sex? Just the lies? Just the part where you moved in with him while asking me for a break. She stopped, realizing she'd been caught. How did you know about that? Small town, big mouths, remember? I pulled my arm free and started walking toward the gallery. She followed, still crying, still begging. The exhibition is ruined, she said. Julian's wife heard the recording. She's filing for divorce and threatening to destroy him financially. He can't sponsor the show now. That's a shame. I was looking forward to seeing your photography. Ed, don't do this. Don't destroy my career because you're angry at me. I stopped and turned to face her. Mel, I didn't destroy your career. You did that when you decided to sleep with your sponsor. I just made sure everyone knew about it. What do you want? Money? The house? I'll give you whatever you want if you'll help me fix this. I want my wife back. The woman I married, who loved me enough to stick around when things got tough instead of running to the first rich man who showed her attention. But that woman doesn't exist anymore, does she? She stared at me, tears streaming down her face, and I saw the exact moment she realized I wasn't going to save her from the consequences of her choices. You bastard, she whispered. You cruel, vindictive bastard. Yeah, I said. I am. Funny how betrayal brings out the worst in people. I left her standing there and drove home to plan Phase 3. Because Julian Crane hadn't suffered nearly enough yet, and I was just getting started. That afternoon, I called a lawyer. 2 weeks after the radio broadcast, Millbrook had divided into camps. Team Ed consisted of most of the working-class folks who'd known me for 20 years and understood what it felt like to get screwed over by people with more money than morals. Team Melissa was smaller but louder, mostly her artsy friends and social climbers who thought I was a bitter cripple, taking revenge on a woman who deserved better. Julian Crane had no team at all. His wife had cleaned him out in the divorce, taking half his art collection and the mansion. His reputation as a patron of the arts was destroyed. Nobody wanted to do business with a man who'd been publicly exposed as a homewrecker. He'd moved into a rental house on the wrong side of town and was trying to rebuild his life with whatever money his ex-wife had left him, which wasn't much. I was sitting in my studio, putting finishing touches on a new painting, a portrait of a sinking ship, when someone started pounding on my front door. Hard, angry pounding that rattled the windows. Ed Harlow, Julian's voice, slurred and furious. Open this goddamn door! I looked out the window and saw him standing on my porch, swaying slightly. His silver hair was uncombed, his expensive clothes wrinkled, and he was holding what looked like a bottle of whiskey. We need to talk, he shouted. I opened the door and got my first close look at Julian Crane's downfall. The man who'd once considered himself the king of Maine's art world now looked like a homeless person in designer clothes. His eyes were bloodshot, his face unshaven, and he smelled like he'd been marinating in alcohol for days. Talk about what, Julian? You know what? You destroyed my life, you vindictive piece of shit. I didn't destroy anything. I just shined a light on what was already there. He stepped closer, and I caught the full force of his whiskey breath. You recorded private conversations. You humiliated my wife, cost me my marriage, my reputation, my business. Your ex-wife, you mean. The one who took half your stuff when she found out you were screwing around. This is all your fault. No, Julian. This is all your fault. You wanted my wife? Congratulations. You got her. along with everything that comes with being a home wrecker in a small town. He took a swing at me, clumsy, drunk, telegraphed from a mile away. I stepped aside and watched him stumble past me into the living room. "You think you won?" he said, turning around with murder in his eyes. "You think destroying me fixes anything?" "I think it's a good start. Your wife doesn't love you anymore, Ed. She never will again. Even if she leaves me, she'll never come back to a broken-down cripple who can't even hold a hammer." The words hit harder than his fist would have, because they were true, and we both knew it. "Maybe not," I said. "But she'll never respect you either. Because deep down, she knows you're the kind of man who steals other people's wives and then whines when there are consequences. Fuck you. Fuck you too, Julian. Now get out of my house." He didn't move. Instead, he looked around my living room, at the paintings on the walls, the photos of me and Melissa from happier times, the life I'd built before he came along and wrecked it. "Nice place," he said. "Be a shame if something happened to it." "Is that a threat?" "It's a promise. You want to play games? I can play games too." He left, taking his whiskey and his threats with him, but I knew he'd be back. Men like Julian Crane don't accept defeat gracefully. They get desperate, and desperate men do stupid things. I called Mick. "Julian just paid me a visit," I said. "Drunk, angry, making threats. You want me to come over?" "Not yet. But keep your phone on. I think things are about to get interesting." They got interesting 3 hours later when I heard glass breaking in my studio. I grabbed a baseball bat and crept down the hallway, expecting to find Julian trashing my paintings. Instead, I found Melissa. She was standing in the middle of my studio, surrounded by broken glass and ruined canvases. My seascape, the one I'd been working on the night I first suspected her affair, was slashed to ribbons. Paint was splattered across the walls like blood from a crime scene. "Mel? What the hell are you doing?" She turned to face me, and I saw that she'd been crying. Her makeup was smeared, her hair disheveled, and she was holding one of my palette knives like a weapon. "Destroying your art," she said. "The way you destroyed my life. You destroyed your own life when you decided to fuck Julian Crane." "No!" She threw the palette knife at me. It clattered harmlessly against the wall. "You destroyed it when you recorded us. When you played our private conversation on the radio. When you turned this whole town against me. I turned the town against you. Mel, you're the one who called me ordinary and broken. You're the one who said you wasted 15 years with me. I just made sure everyone heard what you really thought." Those were private words said in a moment of honesty. For the first time in months, you told the truth about how you felt about our marriage. She looked around at the destroyed paintings, the chaos she'd created, and I saw something break inside her. Not guilt or remorse, just the final collapse of whatever love we'd once shared. "I can't stay in this town," she said quietly. "Everyone looks at me like I'm garbage." "Where will you go?" "Julian has a friend in California. Gallery owner. He thinks he can get me work." "So, you're running away." "With Julian. We're starting over, somewhere people don't know about this." She gestured at the ruins of my studio, but I knew she meant the ruins of our marriage. "What about the house?" "The gallery? Keep it all. I don't want anything that reminds me of this place." She walked toward the door, stepping carefully around the broken glass. At the threshold, she stopped and looked back at me. "I did love you, Ed. Maybe not at the end, but I did love you once." "I know. I loved you too. I'm sorry it ended like this." "No, you're not. You're sorry you got caught." She flinched like I'd slapped her, but she didn't deny it. A moment later, she was gone, leaving me alone with the wreckage of my art and my marriage. I called Mick. "It's over," I said when he answered. "Over how?" "Melissa came by, trashed my studio, said she's leaving town with Julian." Jesus, you okay? I'm better than okay. I'm free. The next morning, I started cleaning up the studio. Most of the paintings were ruined, but I didn't care. They were pictures of a life I didn't want to remember anyway. I was sweeping up glass when I found something unexpected. A check, fallen behind my easel. It was from the Millbrook Art Society, payment for a painting I'd sold at their charity auction last month. $500. Not much, but enough to buy new canvases and start over. I looked around the destroyed studio and smiled. Maybe Melissa had done me a favor after all. Maybe it was time to paint something new. Something that wasn't angry or sad or full of regret. Something that was just mine. I drove to the art supply store and bought everything I needed for a fresh start. Canvases, brushes, paints in colors I'd never tried before. Bright yellows and vibrant greens and the kind of blue that reminded me of hope instead of storms. That afternoon, I set up my easel and started painting. Not a seascape this time, a landscape. Rolling hills under a clear sky with a road that led somewhere new. It wasn't perfect. My right arm still didn't work quite right, and my technique was still amateur at best. But it was honest, and it was mine, and it was the first thing I'd created in months that wasn't motivated by anger or revenge. As I worked, I thought about Melissa and Julian, probably packing their things and planning their escape to California. I wondered if they'd be happy together, or if they'd eventually turn on each other the way cheaters usually do. I decided I didn't care. 6 months later, I got a postcard from Los Angeles. No message, just a picture of the Hollywood sign and Melissa's signature. I stuck it in a drawer and forgot about it. My paintings were getting better. The local coffee shop had bought 3 of them, and the Millbrook Art Society had asked me to teach a beginner's class. I was making friends, building a new life, discovering who Ed Harlow was when he wasn't somebody's husband or somebody's victim. It turned out he was someone I actually liked. One evening, I was sitting on my porch watching the sunset when Mick stopped by with a 6-pack of beer. "Heard from the ex lately?" he asked. "Postcard a few months ago. You?" "Nothing. But I heard from Dave at the radio station that Julian's been calling, trying to get him to play some kind of apology message. Dave told him to go to hell." "Good for Dave. You ever regret it?" "The whole revenge thing? I thought about it while I opened my beer. Did I regret destroying Julian's reputation? Did I regret exposing Melissa's betrayal to the whole town? Did I regret fighting back instead of just accepting my role as the cuckolded husband who was supposed to suffer in silence?" "No," I said. "I don't regret any of it." "Even though it cost you your marriage?" "Mick, my marriage was over the minute Melissa decided I wasn't good enough for her anymore. Everything else was just making it official." We sat in comfortable silence, drinking beer and watching the sun disappear behind the pine trees. Somewhere in California, my ex-wife was probably starting her new life with her rich boyfriend, convinced she'd traded up from a broken construction worker to a sophisticated art collector. I hoped it worked out for them. I really did. But if it didn't, if Julian turned out to be the kind of man who betrayed his first wife and would eventually betray his second, well, that wasn't my problem anymore. I had my own life to build, my own art to create, my own future to paint. And this time, I was going to make it a masterpiece. Masterpiece, 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 masterpiece.